"I'll marry the first man who asks," Mae Calloway said, and the whole saloon laughed before the blacksmith answered. "Then marry me." The laughter died so fast the room seemed to crack around it. Cards froze in midair. Whiskey stopped halfway to lips. Even the piano player let the last bent note hang under the smoke-black rafters. Mae stood beside the stove with her chin up and heat burning across her face, while Jonah Reed rose from the back table, where he had been mending a spur strap with a knife. He was the last man in Dry Creek she expected to hear. Maybe the last man in town who wasted words at all. Forged soot darkened his rolled sleeves. Dust clung to his boots. A pale scar ran from the corner of his jaw to his ear. He did not grin with the others. He did not treat her line like a flirtation. He only looked at her with iron-gray eyes and repeated, calm as a hammer on steel, "Marry me." The saloon smelled of spilled beer, wet wool, cigar smoke, and old pine boards warmed too long by the stove. Wind worried the batwing doors. Outside, wagon rims rattled over frozen ruts, and somewhere a dog barked into the dark. Inside, every face in town had turned toward Mae as if she were stock on a block. That was what had finally driven the words out of her. An hour earlier, Sheriff Tolland had nailed the county notice to the wall. Her father's freight yard, the livery sheds, and the river pasture that controlled the South Crossing would be seized for debt by Saturday unless Mae produced payment or a legal partner to assume the contract. Men who had never lifted a finger while Caleb Calloway coughed himself into the grave now leaned on the bar and debated what should be done with his daughter. A woman can't run Washburn Pass alone. Sell to Harlan. She'll need a husband before she needs a ledger. Mae had let them talk until rage shook her hands. Then she climbed on a chair and threw her joke like a knife, meaning to shame the whole room. Instead, Jonah Reed stood up. Virgil Harlan laughed first. He lounged near the stove in a polished vest, silver watch chain bright against his belly, all comfort and confidence. He owned half the grazing land north of the river and spoke like the rest already belonged to him. Two riders flanked him, smiling the way men smile when they think a woman's trouble is entertainment. "Careful, Miss Calloway," Harlan drawled. "A joke can become a contract if enough witnesses hear it." "Then pray they're all drunk," Mae shot back. A few men chuckled, but not many. Harlan's eyes stayed cold. Jonah crossed the room through the tobacco haze and stopped at the foot of Mae's chair. "Get down before you fall," he said. "I can manage a chair." "Didn't say you couldn't." That quiet in him made her angrier than mockery would have. She hopped down, skirts brushing the stove. Up close he smelled of coal smoke, leather, and the clean bite of night air. There was a fresh split on his lip and a stiffness in his right hand like he'd been in trouble already. "You making sport of me too?" she asked. "No." "Then why?" His gaze slid to the county notice, then to Harlan, then back to her. "Because your father kept this town fed through 2 winters. Because Harlan wants your route more than he wants his money. Because a preacher can sign quicker than a banker can steal. Pick one." The room shifted at that. Everyone knew Harlan wanted the South route. Every wagon, herd, and army team that crossed Washburn Pass paid fees at Calloway Land before snow closed the road. Caleb had refused every offer for 10 years. 2 weeks later he was found dead in an arroyo, neck broken, wagon overturned, with a bruise under one ear nobody explained. Mae had buried him with red dust still on his boots. "You think marriage fixes murder?" she asked. Jonah's jaw tightened. "No, but it buys time." Harlan uncrossed his boot and straightened. "Time for what?" "A ruined blacksmith and a debt-ridden girl to starve together." "My debts are my own," Mae said. "Not for long." Jonah stepped closer. "You don't have to answer now." That almost broke her temper. "You barely speak to me in church." "Church ain't where decisions get made." "And saloons are?" "Tonight they are." Old Mrs. Pike rapped her cane on the floor. "Girl, hear the terms before you throw away the only stubborn fool in the room." A murmur followed. Not approval, not refusal. Dry Creek feared Harlan, but it feared losing the Calloway crossing more. Mae folded her arms. "Fine. Terms. Tomorrow," Jonah said. "Witnesses only. 3 months until your notes are sorted. After that, if you want free, you get free. Route stays in your name. Nothing sold without your say." "You planned that quickly." "Been thinking on it since your father died." That hit harder than the proposal. Harlan's smile sharpened. "Ask him why a man who avoids every dance in town suddenly wants a bride." Mae turned back. "Yes. Want." For the first time Jonah hesitated. A shadow crossed his face, something old and jagged. "Because I owe your father," he said. "For what?" "A truth I should have told sooner." Before Mae could demand more, the saloon doors burst open on a rush of black wind. Tommy Vale from the livery stumbled in hatless, cheeks white, clutching a scrap of folded paper. "Miss Mae," he gasped. "Your house windows shot out. Found this on the floor." She took the note. It smelled of powder smoke. 3 words were scratched across it in blunt pencil. "Don't what a ghost." Mae lifted her head. Jonah had gone pale beneath the forge soot. Then, from somewhere outside in the moon-bitten dark, came the hard clang of iron striking iron from Jonah Reed's closed smithy, though no forge fire should have been burning there at all. Nobody in the saloon moved until the echo of that phantom hammer died into the wind. Jonah turned for the doors at once. Mae caught his sleeve before he could leave. "You don't disappear every time my life turns strange." "I'm not disappearing," he said. "I'm seeing who lit my forge. I'm coming." "No. You forget whose window was shot out." Harlan's riders smirked. Sheriff Tolland studied the floor with great devotion. That decided her. Mae snatched the shotgun from its pegs beside the door, checked both shells, and stepped into the night before anyone else could object. Cold hit like river water. Main Street lay under a wash of moonlight, boardwalks silver, windows dark, hitching posts long and black across the dirt. The wind smelled of sage, chimney smoke, and the promise of snow somewhere beyond the hills. A shutter banged loose. A mule stamped in its stall. Jonah came after her with a muttered curse. His forge sat near the freight sheds, squat and black at the edge of town. No light showed now. No hammer rang. The silence felt wrong, as if the building itself were listening. Mae cocked the shotgun. "Ghost?" "No. Men like us only earn memories." He moved ahead of her, hand near the revolver at his hip. "Stay behind me. I don't take orders from men I ain't married." A rough sound almost escaped him. "Then pretend we're discussing weather." The side door hung broken inward. Inside, the forge was dark except for the last red breath of buried embers. Quenched coal, cold iron, and fresh blood scented the air. Mae saw the blood first, striped across the dirt floor toward the tool racks. Jonah lit a lantern, and gold light pushed back the dark enough to reveal Ben Vale crumpled behind a barrel of horseshoes, wrists bound in telegraph wire, one eye swelling shut. Mae knelt beside him and cut the wire with her boot knife. "Who did this?" "3 men," Ben rasped. "Maybe 4. Looking for Reed. Said he hid something under the forge." He swallowed against pain. "One had Harlan's saddle stamp on his glove. Tried to cover it after." Jonah was already scraping ashes aside with an iron poker. Beneath the banked coals sat a narrow black box, gouged where someone had tried to pry it open. "What is that?" Mae asked. "Trouble." She stood. "You owe me better than one-word answers." He set the box on the anvil. "After we moved Ben, they got the boy to Dr. Mercer's house and left him in the doctor's care. By the time they stepped back into the street, church bells had struck midnight and Dry Creek had gone still in that uneasy way towns did when fear traveled faster than sleep. Jonah led her toward the freight yard. Wagons stood in pale rows beneath the clouds, canvas tops snapping softly in the wind. The river muttered over rocks beyond the sheds. At the water trough, he drew a key from his hatband and opened the box. Inside lay an oilcloth bundle, a cracked silver pocket watch, and a ledger no bigger than a Bible. "Your father gave me this in November," he said. Mae stared at him. "Why?" "Because he thought someone meant to kill him. He asked me to ride with him to Judge Bell in Red Mesa. I didn't go." Her throat closed. "You let him ride alone?" "I meant to follow before dawn." His voice stayed flat, but his knuckles whitened on the box. By the time I reached the arroyo, his wagon was already on its side. Mae opened the ledger. At first it held ordinary freight tallies in her father's neat hand. Then the pages changed. Bribes. Missing government rifles disguised as farm tools. Grain allotments sold twice over. Crossing fees collected under false brands. Virgil Harlan's name appeared again and again beside numbers large enough to hang a rich man and ruin several poorer ones with him. She looked up slowly. This could bury him. It could bury us first. Jonah opened the cracked watch. Hidden inside was a folded scrap bearing 3 names: Sheriff Tolland, Deputy Crane, Reverend Sykes. Mae felt cold run through her despite the shotgun against her palms. The preacher too? Your father didn't know who he could trust. Wind hissed through wagon spokes. A horse stamped in its stall. Mae stared out into the yard her father had built board by board. And for the first time since his death, she understood how small grief had been compared with what stood behind it. This was not debt. This was hunting. Jonah watched her. You decide now. Burn it and live quiet. Or marry me by dawn. Keep the route from Harlan's hands. And ride with me to Red Mesa. If I say yes, Mae asked, is this duty or pity? Neither. His eyes did not leave hers. It's about not failing him twice. That did it. She had buried her father, listened to men bargain over her future, and reacted to everything as if the world kept pushing while she only braced. Harlan counted on that. So did every coward who hid behind law after dark. Mae shut the ledger, lifted the shotgun, and made her choice. No church, she said. Jonah blinked. What? I said yes. But not under Reverend Sykes, and not like cattle in a pen. Mrs. Pike can witness. Dr. Mercer can witness. We sign at my house before sunrise. Then we ride with the ledger. My terms. For the first time, respect warmed the hard planes of his face. All right. Bootsteps sounded on the boardwalk beyond the yard. Mae turned. 3 lanterns bobbed at the gate. Virgil Harlan rode in front, coat flapping like a black wing, Deputy Crane on one side and Drover Lusk on the other. By county authority, Harlan called. I'm claiming temporary custody of the Calloway books until this debt matter is settled. And if Reed interferes, I'll hang him for what he did in Abilene. Mae felt Jonah go still beside her. She did not look away from Harlan. What did you do in Abilene? She whispered. Harlan smiled in the lantern glow. Ask your husband-to-be why the dead there knew his name before the undertaker did. The yard tightened around them. Lantern light trembled across wagon wheels and rifle barrels. The river sucked at its banks beyond the cottonwoods. Harlan sat easy in the saddle, but his eyes were bright with old vengeance. Crane looked sick. Lusk looked ashamed. Shame, Mae had learned, could make a man more dangerous than cruelty. Answer me, she said to Jonah. Not now. Now. Harlan laughed softly. 5 years ago in Abilene, Reed rode with a rail crew that settled disputes in the dark. 3 men died one night. One was unarmed. He ran before trial. Mae turned toward Jonah. He said nothing. That silence cut deeper than denial. You should have told me, she said. Yes. One word. No defense. No excuse. Harlan nudged his horse forward. Set down the ledger. Step away from the killer. I'll see the county treats you fair. Mae almost smiled at the word fair. She slid another shell into the shotgun, slow and deliberate. That sounds a great deal like stealing with a longer speech. Last warning. Jonah moved in the instant before the rifles lifted. He snatched the water bucket from the trough and hurled it into the nearest lantern. Glass burst. Flame died. Mae fired at the second lantern before anyone could breathe. The blast split the yard. Horses screamed and reared. Men cursed. Jonah seized her elbow and dragged her between the freight wagons as bullets cracked through canvas overhead, showering dust and torn cloth. The ledger thudded under her arm. Cold mud slid beneath her boots. Harlan shouted for the north gate. They burst through a loose fence plank toward the river trees. 2 saddled horses waited in the shadows, Jonah's mare Juniper and Mae's sorrel Daisy. You expected trouble, Mae said. I expect Harlan the way I expect winter. Ride. They mounted and plunged along the riverbank, branches clawing at sleeves, hooves hammering frozen earth. The night air cut like wire. Black water flashed beside them. Behind came the pounding chase. Abilene. Mae shouted. Tell me. Jonah rode low over Juniper's neck. Rail security. Dirty work, and I knew it. We were sent to frighten a farmer into signing away water rights. My foreman shot him. Then shot the farmer's son for screaming. I killed the foreman and another man. The third escaped. Harlan's brother? Yes. A bullet snapped bark above her head. They burst from the trees into open washland where moonlight silvered the sage. Ahead, the trail forked. Left toward Red Mesa Road. Right toward the Badlands and abandoned Silver Cuts. If we take the Mesa Road, they run us down, Jonah said. Mae hated that he was right, but she drove Daisy right into broken country. Behind them the posse spread wide. The land rose into red gullies, wind moaning through stone slots like voices buried alive. The smell changed from river damp to hot mineral, bat droppings, old dust. Jonah led them into a narrow ravine barely wide enough for a wagon axle. A shot rang out. Juniper stumbled and grunted, but kept going. The ravine bent, opened onto a shelf, and ended at a washout where the trail had fallen away into darkness. There was nowhere left to run. Mae slid from the saddle and pulled Daisy behind a boulder. Jonah dismounted slower. Blood slicked Juniper's hindquarter. She's hit. Flesh, he said. For now. Hoofbeats thundered closer. Jonah thrust the iron box into Mae's hands. There's a miner's shaft below the scrub to your left. Climb down. Follow it east. It comes out near Miller's Dry Spring. Take the ledger and ride. And leave you. If we both stay, we both die. Riders flooded the ravine mouth. Harlan dismounted first, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other, painting the rocks in fever gold. Crane and Lusk spread wide. Mae looked at the hidden shaft, then at Jonah, then at the wounded mare trembling beside him. Save the evidence or save the man who had lied to her, offered her marriage, and put himself between her and every bullet since midnight. Throw down the box, Reed. Harlan shouted. I might only hang you once. Jonah cocked his revolver. Mae, go. No. She snatched the watch from the box, cracked it open, and held the hidden names high in the lantern light. Virgil, you want the ledger because it proves theft. But this list names every man who helped kill my father. If I fall, this goes into the dark and you can explain your soul to the vultures. For the first time, fear crossed Harlan's face. Crane broke first. Panic burst out of him before courage ever could. I didn't mean for Caleb to die, he shouted. He wasn't supposed to fight. Harlan spun toward him with murder in his eyes. Jonah fired. The first shot shattered Harlan's lantern. The second dropped Lusk hard against the rock wall. Mae loosed both shotgun barrels into the confusion below. Flame, smoke, and bitter powder rolled through the ravine. Horses screamed. Men scattered. When the smoke thinned, Crane was on his knees clutching a bleeding shoulder. Lusk was down and groaning, and Harlan had vanished into the dark rocks beside the ledge. Then Cold Steel kissed Mae's throat from behind. She froze. Harlan's voice brushed her ear, low and savage. Drop the paper, or I open you like a mail sack. Jonah turned, saw the knife at her neck, and went still as carved granite. In that stillness, Mae watched something break in him. You don't want me, Mae said carefully. The blade bit just enough to raise a hot thread beneath her skin. You want what I know. Harlan's breath smelled of cloves and whiskey. At last, a practical bride. Tell your blacksmith to lower the gun. Jonah, Mae said. He obeyed, but slowly, eyes never leaving Harlan's face. That slowness kept the rancher's attention where Mae needed it. She still held the cracked watch near her waist. In one sharp motion, she drove it backward into Harlan's wrist. Bone cracked against silver. He cursed and loosened the knife. Mae stamped his boot, dropped to one knee, and Jonah fired. The bullet grazed Harlan's shoulder instead of killing him. He slipped on loose shale and crashed over the side of the shelf into the wash below, vanishing with a shower of stones and a scream that ended in a wet thud. Silence followed. Smoke drifted. Juniper stamped and shivered. Crane moaned somewhere beneath them. Jonah crossed the gap in 2 strides and caught Mae's face between both rough hands as if he needed proof she was still there. His palms were hot and shaking. The touch lasted only a heartbeat, but it told her more than any vow could have. You all right? Ask me when my knees stop leaving town. A breath of laughter escaped him, worn thin by shock. Together they bound Crane with saddle cinch, kicked the loose rifles into the wash, and climbed down to where Harlan lay alive among broken stones, his left leg bent wrong, blood soaking through his coat. He glared up at Jonah with naked hatred. Should have died in Abilene, he spat. Jonah took Harlan's gun and tossed it away. Not tonight. By dawn they had dragged him into an abandoned assay shack above the ravine, more prison than shelter. It smelled of old pitch, dust, and mouse droppings. Wind threaded the wall cracks. A rusted or scale creaked from a beam whenever the gusts rose. Mae cleaned the cut on her neck with water from Jonah's canteen, then bound Juniper's wound, then forced Jonah to sit still long enough for her to wrap the furrow a bullet had sliced through his forearm. Hold still, she muttered. I have been. Poor martyr. Without his coat, he looked leaner and older, the night stripped plain across him. Scars marked his shoulder and ribs. The world had written on him with iron. Mae sat across from him on a feed sack and turned the cracked watch over in her hands. Morning light found the scratched initials inside the lid. Yar. Your mother? She asked. He nodded. Evelyn Reed said a watch ain't for controlling time. It's for remembering it passes whether you're proud or not. My father carried it because I gave it to him with the ledger. He wanted collateral against my conscience. Jonah looked down at the floor. Smart man. Outside, a hawk cried over the red rocks. Inside, Harlan drifted in and out of fever, muttering curses. Crane sat trussed near the wall, staring at his boots like they belonged to someone else. For the first time since the saloon, silence came without immediate gunfire behind it. Mae watched Jonah's bandaged arm. Why didn't you tell me about Abilene? He took a while to answer. Because once folks hear killer, they stop sorting dead men from guilty ones. Because I spent 5 years building something honest with iron and sweat, and one story can burn a man faster than grass in August. Because if you looked at me the way you did tonight, I didn't know if I could stand it. How was I looking? Like you hadn't decided whether I was the rope or the hand cutting it. Mae almost looked away. Instead, she slipped the watch chain over her fingers until the silver warmed against her skin. When I was 15, my father taught me to drive a 6-mule team through Washburn Pass in sleet. One mule went lame. The wagon started sliding toward a drop. I told him we were dead. She let out a breath. He said, maybe, but dead ain't here yet. So put your shoulder where it helps. Jonah listened without moving. I'm still angry, she said. You should have told me. But you had chances to run, and you didn't. You had chances to kill Harlan, and you didn't. So for now, I know where to put my shoulder. Something opened in his face then, small and fierce, and almost painful to see. Not relief exactly. More like a man remembering warmth after a long winter. He reached into his shirt pocket and drew out a tiny bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside lay a plain copper ring fashioned from a wagon rivet, hand-smoothed and polished bright. Wasn't planning to ask proper, he said, voice rough. But if we stand before witnesses this morning, I figured you should have something honest from me. Made it after your father died. Couldn't bring myself to hand it over. Mae took the ring. It was simple, warm from his body, imperfect in the best way. She slid it onto her finger. It fit. Wagon wheels sounded faintly from below. Both of them were on their feet at once, guns ready. Through the shack door, Mae saw Mrs. Pike riding beside Dr. Mercer on a wagon bench. Lusk perched beside them, pale and obedient. Hope stirred. Then she saw the dust cloud behind them. Half a dozen more riders from Dry Creek were coming up the trail, and Reverend Sykes rode among them. By the time the wagon reached the shack, the second group had nearly closed the distance. Mrs. Pike climbed down first, skirts snapping in the wind, cane in one hand and a short pistol in the other. She took one look at Harlan broken on the floor and sniffed. Either you two court faster than rabbits, or trouble rides faster than sense. Dr. Mercer hurried past her to examine Harlan. Lusk kept his hands high. Reverend Sykes approached with Sheriff Tolland and 4 townsmen behind him, their horses lathered, their faces gray with dust and dread. Mae stepped into the morning light before anyone else could take the ground from her. Red cliffs burned under the first true sun. Wind pulled loose strands of hair across her cheeks. She did not brush them away. Stop there, she called. Anybody reaching for a gun learns whether I shoot as well as my father claimed. They stopped. Tolland lifted both palms. Miss Calloway, we've come to settle this lawful. She almost laughed. Lawful would have been helping when Harlan came for my books at midnight. Lawful would have been asking why my father died with a bruise under his ear and no thief took his purse. She pointed toward Crane bound inside the shack. Your deputy already admitted Caleb Calloway was attacked. Want him to say it twice. Every eye turned to Crane. Shame sagged his shoulders. Harlan, white with pain, tried to push upright. Shut your mouth, he rasped. Crane looked at him, then at the townsman, then at Mae. Something in him gave way. Harlan paid us to turn Caleb back from the Red Mesa Road, he said hoarsely. Said Reed's box held lies, and if Caleb reached the judge, we'd all lose our posts. We only meant to frighten him. Caleb fought. Harlan struck him with a trace hook. He fell from the wagon and broke wrong in the arroyo. Reverend knew after. Tolland too. We kept quiet. The wind carried the confession out over the rocks. Nobody spoke. Even the horses seemed to listen. Tolland lowered his eyes. I told myself it was done and couldn't be undone. Mrs. Pike spat in the dust. Coward scripture. Reverend Sykes pulled off his hat, crushing the brim in both hands. Virgil promised money for the school roof if I held my peace. I called it protecting the town. His voice shook. It was protecting myself. Harlan gave a weak, ugly laugh. Weak-bellied fools. She can't prove half of it. Mae opened the ledger and read. Payment after payment. Bribes matched to dates, shipments, false brands. Missing rifles. Stolen grain. County officers paid in quiet coin. Then she handed the cracked watch to Dr. Mercer. Open the back. He pried loose the plate with his thumbnail. Hidden behind the works was Caleb Calloway's last pencil note, cramped and clear. If I don't return, Reed was right to fear Harlan. Take ledger to Judge Bell. Let Mae choose her own road. Do not let them sell her future for my silence. For one terrible second, Mae could not breathe. Then Jonah stepped close enough that the heat of him steadied the cold inside her ribs. Harlan saw the town turning away from him then. He saw Talland shrinking, the preacher breaking, ordinary men rediscovering consciences once power stopped shining. So he lunged for the only move left. With a grunt, he seized the doctor's dropped scalpel and dragged Mercer against him, blade flashing at the old man's throat. Back, he snarled. I take the wagon or I carve him open. Everything narrowed. Jonah stepped forward one pace. Virgil, this ends now. It ended in Abilene when you killed my brother. Your brother killed a boy for crying, Jonah said. No heat now. Only iron. I should have stood in court and said it then. I'm saying it here. Mercer's frightened eyes found Mae. Put your shoulder where it helps. She moved. Not toward the knife. Toward the rusted or scale hanging from the shack beam. She fired the shotgun into the chain above it. Iron snapped. The heavy scale crashed down into Harlan's wounded side. He screamed and fell, scalpel skittering across the boards. Jonah was on him at once, kicking the blade aside and pinning his wrist with a boot. Talland and two townsmen rushed in with rope, binding Harlan so tight the curses went thin and useless. No one cheered. Justice in the West rarely sounded like cheering. When it was done, Mae leaned the shotgun against the wall and braced a hand on the doorframe because all the strength went out of her knees at once. Jonah turned from Harlan and came to her. You all right? He asked. It was the same question from the ledge, but now the answer came with sunlight instead of smoke. Ask me when this day grows less foolish. A corner of his mouth moved. Might take years. Then stay patient. Mrs. Pike cleared her throat hard enough to shame thunder. Since we are gathered among criminals, cowards, and one doctor who nearly got himself carved open, I suggest finishing the marriage before another fool interrupts. Mae looked at Jonah. The copper ring still sat on her finger, dull with dust, bright where the sun found its edges. She could walk away now. No one in Dry Creek would dare challenge her claim after this. She was free to keep her own name, her own yard, her own anger. Freedom mattered. So did what a person chose to do with it. You offered 3 months, she said. I remember. What if I want longer than that? Hope broke across his face like first light over a ridge. Then I reckon I'll spend longer earning it. Mae took his hand before fear could speak first. His fingers closed around hers with careful strength, as if holding something breakable and precious at once. Reverend, she said, turning to Sykes, you don't get to speak over my father's grave again. But you may witness this if you can keep the words honest. The preacher bowed his head. When he asked whether she came freely, Mae answered without hesitation. I do. When he asked Jonah, the blacksmith's voice came low and steady. With all I've got. The ceremony was short. It did not need more. Mrs. Pike signed first, hand firm as oak root. Dr. Mercer signed next. Talland watched in silence while Crane and Harlan were loaded onto the wagon under guard for Red Mesa. By noon the procession rolled back into Dry Creek, not as a funeral train, but as proof. The ledger went under lock until Judge Bell could receive it. Talland surrendered his star. Lusk testified for mercy. Reverend Sykes sold his watch chain to buy the school roof without Harlan's money. And that same evening, while a clean wind moved through the cottonwoods, Mae unlocked the freight yard gates herself, and Jonah rekindled the forge fire. Years later, travelers crossing Washburn Pass still heard the story of the joke made in a crowded saloon and the blacksmith stubborn enough to answer it like a vow. They pointed to the copper ring on Mae Calloway Reed's hand as she checked freight tallies at the yard desk, and to the cracked watch ticking above Jonah's anvil. Folks said Dry Creek survived because one woman refused to be sold and one man finally chose truth over silence. But the part Mae kept for herself came after the noise, after the law, after the last wagon rolled home at dusk. Jonah stepped out beside her onto the fence by the yard, their shoulders touching, the river whispering through the dark cottonwoods. Neither asked whether the joke had been a mistake. Neither asked whether tomorrow would be easy. Below them, the new sign over the gate swayed in the evening breeze, painted by Mae's hand in fresh black letters. Calloway Reed. And beyond town, where the road bent west into a fire-colored sunset, their two shadows stretched side by side across the dust and pointed home.